Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now today I'm going to give you a ton of data. We're going to talk about how much energy the heat pumps, the electric cars have used, how much the solar panels have generated, how much we've imported and exported. And all of this is to answer the most frequently asked question that I get on this channel. And that is, how much did you have to spend on all of this infrastructure to be able to save money? And more importantly, when will you get that money back? So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then stick around and we'll get into it. Okay, I realize not everybody is a data junkie. Not everybody wants to go into the charts and dig down into the data. So what I'm going to do is for each section that we go through today, we're going to go through the electric cars, we're going to go through the heat pump, we're going to go through the solar and batteries, we're going to go through importing and exporting of energy. I'm going to give you a single summary slide at the beginning, and I'm going to put timestamps in the video. So if you do want to jump forward and you just want the data without how did I get to all of these numbers, then you can jump forward. But stick around to the end, because at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to answer that question that comes up more than any others. And that is, if you had to start again, if you didn't have any solar batteries or anything like that, didn't have a heat pump, how much would it all cost? And more importantly, when would you get your money back? So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at all of the data for 2025 so far. Now we're into the autumn, although it's looking a little wintry outside. So we're going to take data from the 1st of January up until the 31st of October. Now, what I've done is, you'll see later on, is I've done a projection of what it's going to cost to run for the full year, and we're going to use that number to figure out how much all of this costs. So let's start with electric cars. Now, I understand not everybody has an EV, not everybody wants an EV, but we are a 2 EV family. There's only 2 of us, we both need a car, we both have electric cars. But so far this year in 2025, those 2 cars have clocked up a combined mileage of 16,054 miles. And we have charged those cars almost exclusively on Octopus Intelligent Go. My car, which is has a bit more of a longer range, we have done some public charging, and for that we've used the Octopus Electroverse card. I think that's how it's pronounced, Electroverse. Electroverse is a really cool thing. It's sort of one card to rule them all. So you can use Ionity, you can use many of the other charging standards that are out there. The ones you can use change all the time. So again, you have an app for that, but you also have an RFID card. So you can just go up to a charger. So as I've done a couple of times just very recently, I've gone to a Shell Go charging station, tap my card. It's immediately authorized me. I've started charging, and then rather than have to pay for it there and then, the charge for that just gets added onto my Octopus electricity bill. So 100% of my charging for the year for both cars has either been on Octopus Intelligent Go or Electroverse, and those charges all end up on my energy bill. So for running those 2 cars for those 16,054 miles, we have spent £397.52. Now, as I said, we're going to get into the details. So if you don't want to hang around for this bit, you can jump to the next section where we'll talk about the heat pump. But for those that have been on the channel for a while know, we have 2 electric cars. We have a 2023 Tesla Model Y long range, and we have a 2014 Nissan Leaf. Now, this Nissan Leaf is now 11 years old. It's still running beautifully. There is nothing wrong with it, other than I do need to get under the bonnet and clean the cobwebs out. But my wife uses it every single day of the week. We charge the battery to 100% every single night, and we have seen a very, very small amount of degradation. For those that know the Nissan Leaf, it has a little battery gauge. I think it's 12 sections. We've lost 1 battery section, and it runs in the winter maybe 75 miles a day on a full charge. In the summer, we might get 95 to 100 miles. But given the amount of miles that my wife drives in it, that's more than enough. So as you can see there, for the Tesla, 95% of it was home charging on Intelligent Go. We spent £152.47 on that. 5% of that was what I call on the road charging using the Electrovis card. That was £79.10. Now, again, you can probably work out from that. Charging on the road is a lot more expensive than charging at home. We'd be paying somewhere in the region of an average of about 69 pence per kilowatt hour on the road, whereas we're paying 7 pence a kilowatt hour at home. And the Nissan Leaf was 100% home charged. We don't do long journeys in a car that's only got a range of less than 100 miles. So again, but still, we do a lot of short journeys in it. So 7,112 miles so far this year, and that's cost us £165.95. So as I say, we've spent nearly £400, £397.52, which, if you think about that, for two cars, for two people, for 10 months of driving, it comes out at about the average of about 5 tanks of fuel. If your car costs £75 to fill up, 5 tanks of fuel to run two cars running 16,000 miles for 10 months, you just can't beat it. So, as I say, 100% of the cost of that is accounted for in our energy bills, and that will become important when we get into what our energy bills for the year have been. Okay, let's move on and talk about the heat pump. So for most of the summer, we haven't really been using the heating an awful lot. We did turn it on just towards the end of October as the temperatures started to drop. The thermostats kicked in and turned the heating on. So last month we didn't use a great deal. We used 137 kilowatt hours of energy to heat the house for the last 2 weeks of the month, and also to generate hot water. That gave us a combined heat output of 542 kilowatt hours of heat. For those that track coefficients of performance, that was a COP of 3.96. Now this table is a little bit of an eye chart, and what I do is every month is I track how many kilowatt hours we used versus how much heat output we got, and that helps us measure the COP. And then if we take an average across the whole year, what we call the SCOP, the seasonal coefficient of performance, for 2025 so far, we're running at a seasonal coefficient of performance of about 3.59. And you can see there in the column on the right hand side, there are, we sort of range sometimes between about 3.3 up to nearly 5 in 1 month. But the bit I find interesting is this graph. So this is something that I track every single month. And in every single month, I take the output data from the heat pump and I measure, what does it cost me to run this? What would it have cost me to run this if I was on the cozy tariff and I was averaging about 20 pence per kilowatt hour? And then what would it cost me if I was just paying flat rate for my electricity, if I was on a standard tariff where it was a fixed rate 24 hours a day? Then the yellow bar is, what did I actually pay for gas 12 months before? Because before we had the heat pump, we obviously had a gas boiler. This was what we were paying for gas. And as you can see there, every single month, the bars stay in the same order. So gas is always the most expensive. The fixed tariff is next, cozy is next, and what I'm paying, the blue bars, are always the lowest. And that just lets me know that A, I'm on track, and it lets me see how much cheaper my heat pump has been to run compared to what I was paying for gas just 12 months before. Now, when we consolidate all of those months, you get this chart here, which is the price for the whole year so far. So from the beginning of 2025 up until the end of October, as you can see, if I was paying the 7.8 pence per kilowatt hour, which is my average on the Octopus Intelligent Go. I know everybody just calculates it as 7p, but I use an app which looks at all of my usage, and even when we do use a little bit of power from the grid, and it gives me a daily average. That daily average is about 7.8 pence per kilowatt hour. So that's the number I use to calculate, just to keep the numbers a little more realistic. So we would have paid £144 to run the heat pump for the 10 months of the year. And again, you can look at it from a cozy, from a fixed energy, a fixed electricity tariff, and also what did I actually pay for gas 12 months ago for those first 10 months. So the savings without solar, forget what I'm paying and just look at the cozy and the fixed contract. If you were on cozy compared to what I was paying for gas, you'd have saved £487. If you were on that fixed contract, remember, which is the same rate, 24 hours a day, you'd have saved £203. So again, for anyone that's trying to do an ROI calculation on a heat pump, these are real use figures compared to what I was paying for gas. Now, obviously, my savings are a lot more. I'm paying £144 if I was paying that £144, and we'll come to that in a moment. So compared to what I was paying a year ago for gas for those 10 months, that's a saving of £713 against gas. So as you can see here, having solar and batteries and a heat pump together really do help when it comes to that how much, how can you maximize the savings. So again, saving £713 just off of my gas bill. As you're going to see in a moment, we didn't really pay £144 for that energy. We actually saved even more than that. So then we go on and we look at our solar and battery system. Now, we have quite a complicated solar and battery system, and it's generally what I would say larger than a house this size would normally use, but we do have a heat pump, we do have 2 electric cars, so therefore we've sized the system pretty much for our needs. The system itself so far this year has generated 8.25 megawatt hours, and we have exported 6.5 megawatt hours of that. So on the Octopus outgoing tariff, they pay us 15 pence per kilowatt hour. I'll let you do the maths as to how much that is earned, or you can just hang on a few minutes and we'll dive into the data and I'll show you. But so far to date, including the running of our cars, including the running of the heat pump, with the energy we've generated from our solar panels, our energy bill as of the 1st of November stands at minus £280.84. That means I haven't paid a single penny for energy in 2025, and Octopus owe me £280.84. So let's talk about how we get there. So this year's been a really good year for solar. Just to put it into perspective, this is the chart from my solar system for last year. You can see in the whole of 2024, we generated 5.4 megawatt hours of energy. In 2025, we've already generated 8.28 megawatt hours. We might get a little bit more. I suspect we might get to 8.5 by the end of December. But obviously, November and December, you don't get a great deal of generation. But as you can see, compared to last year and with the same system, we've generated almost a third more. And again, you can see, ignore the 2022 bar on the graph there. We transitioned from our older system, which just didn't generate stats, was an old Fronius system, to the Solar Edge system. So we don't have stats before that. But as you can see there, 2023 and 2022, 2023 and 2024, very similar. 2025, outstanding year. So how much power did we use? So what I've done here is I've taken the graphs from my Octopus app. I used to bring them in from the website because I thought the graphs on the website were better, but Octopus has changed them yet again. It's like the 5th time this year, and the graphs are just not as good anymore. So these are the graphs from my mobile app. You can see there last month, we spent £106.87 importing energy from Octopus. That equates to roughly 1.18 megawatt hours of energy, or 1,181 kilowatt hours of energy. That is slightly more than we did in September. Now, we're pretty consistent with our usage throughout the year. The reason for that is the way that we run our house is we import energy overnight, we fill up our batteries, and those batteries sustain the house, I would say, for 99% of the year without ever having to dip into peak rate electricity. So month to month, they don't change that much unless there is something specific that causes it to change. So why did we use 13% more? Well, the reason was the heat pump kicked in the last 2 weeks of October and started heating the house. So we did use a little bit more energy than we did in September. From the year's point of view, unfortunately, the Octopus app, you would think from a company that bills you for your electricity would actually be able to tell you how much money, but if you select year, it says we can't work that out, but don't worry, I know that number because I've paid the bills up until now. But so far this year, we've imported nearly 10 megawatt hours, or 9.885 megawatt hours of energy, which roughly works out at, as I say, about a megawatt hour per month on average. Now, if you look at the graph there, you can see in January, when it was very cold, we had days where the temperature didn't get above freezing. The heat pump was running quite hard in January. We used more. In the summer, when we're using it to generate just hot water, we use less. But we average out at about a megawatt hour per month. And as I say, all of that energy, that 10 megawatt hours of energy that we imported from Octopus, has cost us nothing. Octopus still owe us £240. So how did we achieve that? Well, we did that through exporting energy. If you remember at the beginning of this section, I said we exported about 6.5 megawatt hours of electricity, and we got paid for that. So last month, just to put it into perspective, you can see there we spent about £40, or so we earned about £40 exporting energy to Octopus. You'll notice the section in the centre of the graph there where there are days where we exported almost nothing. And that's because we had a relatively grey, overcast month. We didn't generate a lot of electricity from our solar panels, and the energy that we did, we stored in our batteries to allow us to self-consume it. But then in the last few days of the month, we did get some sunny periods, 2 or 3 hours a day, and that allowed us to export, maybe 4, 5, 6 kilowatt hours on average per day. Some days, we did really well. We got sort of 10 or 20 kilowatt hours out, but it was a pretty poor month certainly compared to the rest of 2025. And to compare it just to 1 month ago, we exported 60% less than we did in September. So if we look at it from the whole year's point of view, and this is how we end up with a minus £240 electricity bill, is we've spent the money to build a system that allows us to export large quantities of energy that when we're not using it. So over the course of the year so far, we have exported 6.4, rounded up to 6.5 megawatt hours of electricity, and that means Octopus paid us £973.09. So when you deduct that from what did we import versus what we got paid for export, that gives us the bill of minus £240. Now, again, this is just another graph that I look at each month. I look at previous months, and what you can see here is the zero line. So if we look at September, which are the green bars, how many of the green bars are below the line? Those are days when Octopus paid us. And then the ones that are above the line are the days that we paid them. What you can see is there were a lot more days that Octopus paid us in September versus the pink bars that are below the line, where there are a few at the end of the month, compared to that in October. And just to put that into actual numbers, there were 26 days in October where we paid Octopus, and there were only 5 days in October where they paid us. And this is the trend that you'll see. There were days, if we go back to June and July, where every single day of the month we had a negative energy bill. So at the end of the month, Octopus paid us a chunk of money. As we go through the year, they swap over, and once we get into November, I doubt we'll have any days that are negative. It will all be positive. Just a couple of things to point out in these graphs. So you can see there on the 4th and the 5th, those big spikes were the free energy days. So the way that Octopus gives away free electricity when it's got too much, or it's got an excess because it's really windy out in the North Sea and the wind turbines are producing too much energy, rather than shut them down, they give it away for free. So the way it works is you just use as much as you like during a 1, 2, or even a 3-hour period. And then a few days later, you'll get a retrospective billing. They'll deduct that amount from your bill, but it does still show up in your graphs. So what you can see here is those spikes. Those were the free energy sessions. And then at the end of the month, I've put a box around. You'll notice the negative days. There's not so many of them. That was when the heat pump kicked in. So again, there are things that change month on month, and these are just 2 of those. So just to put October into perspective, and then we'll look at it from a whole year's point of view. So we imported £106.87 in electricity. We don't have any gas anymore. I've left that on there just because we had the gas taken out 2 months ago. So earlier in the year, the gas was incorporated into into these yearly bills. So we spent £106. They paid us £40.74. They refunded £7.52 for the free energy sessions, those two spikes at the beginning of the month, which left us a net bill for the month of £58.61. And then when we look at that across the whole of 2025 so far, this is how we get to our minus £240 energy bill. So back in January and February, like I say, very, very cold, or certainly very, very cold for this part of the UK. We spent £105 in January and we spent £91 in February. And a lot of that was from the heat pump. So this is why I always say to anyone that's considering getting a heat pump, don't look at single months in isolation. You need to look at it across how much is it going to cost you to run over the cost of a full year. Because if you looked at that and you say, my energy bills jumped up massively, I don't want a heat pump because of that, you'd be missing out. So we spent £105 and £91 in January and February. That was what we had to pay to Octopus. And then if you look then, March, April, May, June, July, August and September, they paid us. So in March, not a great deal. We earned about £25. As we get in April, as the solar starts to get better, that starts to jump up. So £72. May, we had a bumper May, £171.69. June 93, July 70, then 43, 19, and now we're back into bills where we have to pay. But when you take all of that as one whole calculation, they owe us £240.84. Now, what's going to happen in November and December? Well, I don't think we're going to have, unless we have a really cold snap, I don't think we're going to probably exceed our January usage. So I would say, let's say an average of about £100 per month, which means we're still going to end up with a negative energy bill at the end of the year. But I will report back in December once I've got November and December's number, and then early January, I'll give you a rundown on what were the costs for the whole year. But right now, it's looking like we're going to pay zero for our energy. And remember, that's to run our house, that's to run our 2 cars, and to run our heat pump. And we're still not going to pay a single penny for it. Okay, so let me answer the question of how much did you have to spend to achieve these savings? Because it sounds great having a zero energy bill, but it doesn't come for free. We have spent a lot of money on solar and batteries and the heat pump and all of the infrastructure to allow us to have these savings. And people always say to me, well, how much did it all cost? And the answer's, it's a bit complicated. The reason is, and this is in my case, is we have 3 different solar systems. We actually, over the course of 15 years, have had about 6 different solar systems. The reason is back in 2010, when the government introduced the FIT scheme, we installed a 2 kilowatt Fronius inverter and 2 kilowatts of panels on our roof under that FIT scheme. And that was when the journey started. And what we've done since then is anytime we've made money, once the system has paid for itself, we take that money and we reinvest it. And we take that money and we reinvest it. So our solar system has paid for itself twice over. So I say that's why it's complicated, because I can't just give you a number, because there are multiple add-ons and all sorts of things that I've added to the system over the years. So I think the easiest way to answer this question is, let's assume we were starting from scratch. Let's assume that this house didn't have any solar panels, didn't have any batteries, and I was going to go out and I was going to buy it all today. And it was probably cheaper than the way I did it, because batteries, certainly even 3 years ago, weren't anywhere near as cheap as they are today. So I went on the Octopus website and I drew a picture on the Google Maps of my roof, and I told it I need 22 panels because that's what I have on my roof today. I told it I needed, and it only gives you an option for large batteries to be Tesla Powerwalls. So I told it I need 2 Tesla Powerwalls. So that'll give me about 27 kilowatt hours of storage. My current battery system is about 29 kilowatt hours of storage. So again, as close as I could get it. But Octopus's quote for that came back at £19,496. Now, there are other vendors out there. I would certainly recommend, if you're doing this, get a quote from Octopus, get a quote from Heatable. And again, if you've got a reputable local installer, I would talk to them as well. Certainly here in East Anglia, my system, certainly my roof system, was installed by a company called Cambridge Solar. I know that they had some issues and they've been acquired by somebody else, so I'm not highly recommending them right now. The original Cambridge Solar, great bunch of guys, did a great job, but I don't know what this new company is about. Slightly more premium offering. I would, certainly in this part of the world, I would talk to Artisan Electrics. Those are the electricians that I use for all my electric work. If you haven't followed Jordan and the team on YouTube, they make a whole series of videos about life as electricians, and they cover everything from going around and doing EICRs in people's houses to installing massive solar systems. Some of the biggest solar systems I've seen. They've done some really good job. But I would get quotes from all of those to make sure that you're getting good value for money. But let's go with this number. Let's say it would cost £19,496 to install a like-for-like solar system. And then I went to the Octopus website again and said, hey, I want a heat pump. Put in the details that it asked, and it gave me a quote of £2,901. And Octopus actually have two versions. So that's the version that if you don't need all your radiators and tanks and everything changed, £2,901, it will be a little bit more if you do need new radiators. Now, bearing in mind, when they did my system, we had new radiators throughout. We had a new water tank. Again, probably slightly more than that, but that's the quote that they gave me for a heat pump. So when we add those two together to build a like-for-like system, you're going to be looking at around £23,000 for the system. Now, that is not a small chunk of change, and I'm fully aware. I get a lot of people in the comments saying I just can't afford that, and to be honest, we couldn't afford that if we were doing it all in one go. We've done our system, as I say, piecemeal as we've gone along, chunk by chunk. When we've had money that we can invest, we've invested it into that. But there are options available. I know a lot of the banks are doing special deals where you can get either very low or sometimes in cases interest-free loans if you're making these kind of investments. I believe Halifax are running something where you can put this onto your mortgage and again pay either 0% or a very low amount. So there are options out there if you want to fund something like this. But £23,000, not a small amount of money. But if you are going to spend £23,000, first of all, you're going to make an assumption, just like we've done, that you're going to get a net zero bill each year, because you don't want to be spending £23,000 and then still having to hand money over to the electricity company. So we're going to assume that, very similar to the way I've got my system set up, the same way that we kind of run our system, that will allow you to have either a zero energy bill, because I think our bill is going to be very close to zero at the end of the year. So we're not going to suddenly, get a huge check from Octopus. We're going to have a zero energy bill at the end of the year, maybe £50 in it. Maybe they send us a check for £50. But depending on the size of your house, now, the way we've done this is what Ofcom say the average energy bills. And I'm sure everyone's going to say, well, my bill's more than that, my bill's less than that. This is just what Ofcom are saying our averages. So they say a small house, about £1,234, a medium house, £1,755, and a large house, £2,470 for your energy bills. Now, again, it doesn't specify what a small, medium, and large house is. I think looking at the amount of energy used, we definitely fit into the large house, and we're not a large house. We have a 3-bedroom house. But having 2 EVs, the amount of energy that we pull in to charge those 2 EVs definitely puts us into the large category. So I'm going to take the large number and I'm going to take my £23,000 and I'm going to divide it by £2,470. So if you were paying £2,470 for your energy, you invest your £23,000, how long does it take to get your money back? Well, you can do the calculation yourself. 23,000 divided by 2,470 is about 9.3 years. Now, depending on your implementation, if you're just doing solar on batteries on its own and not a heat pump, that might be a little less, depending on the setup of how you've got it all configured. But I think if you think about it, 9.3 years return on investment is pretty good. And the reason I say that is that most solar panels, certainly the ones you put on your roof, they're warranted nowadays for about 25 years. Most batteries come with at least a 10-year warranty, and some even more than that. The heat pump itself, certainly my heat pump, came with a 5-year warranty, but has the option to extend that. And again, one of the questions I get a lot is, well, you haven't factored in any of the costs for if something goes wrong and you have to replace the whole system, you've got to find another £23,000. But that's not how things work in the modern world. You don't, if your inverter stops working tomorrow, you don't just take the whole inverter and throw it in the bin and get a new one. You get spares, you get a new board, you get whatever it is. There's a thing you can put inside it to fix it. Same with a heat pump. If something goes wrong with a heat pump, is it a valve that's broken? Is it the fan bearings that need replaced? You don't throw away the whole heat pump just to put a new one in just because the bearings need replaced. Think of it like a washing machine. You don't chuck your washing machine out just because there's something gone wrong with it. You get an engineer out who fixes your washing machine. The same for heat pumps, the same for inverters. And the chances of solar panels going wrong are pretty slim. In the 15 years that we've had solar panels, we have not had a single one fail. Now, that might be down to the quality of the installation. It might be down to the quality of the panels that we chose. I don't know. But I'm not too worried about things failing. If things fail, you get them repaired, you move on. You're not going to have to throw it all out and spend another £23,000 just because one part of it's gone wrong. So I hope if you're thinking about installing solar, this presentation of data, I think that's what I'll call it, this isn't me sitting here saying, look what I did, aren't I great? What I'm trying to do here is to give you a real world situation where we're a family, we live in a 3-bedroom house, we have a couple of cars, we have a heat pump, we have solar panels. This is what is achievable. Now, you're going to get, certainly if you're looking at solar, you're going to get lots of documentation from your solar installer that's going to give you lots of projections. And quite frankly, they're not worth the paper they're printed on because they work on so many assumptions that you never know, are their figures going to be accurate? Are they going to be 10% more, 10% less? You just don't know. So that's why I'm presenting you this data. I want to show you what a real world situation looks like. Yes, I have a large system and most people aren't probably going to spend as much money as I did on a system like this. But it should give you something that you can work from. You can take those numbers, you can adapt them to your own situation, and you can figure out exactly what it would cost for you to do something similar. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I didn't want to just give you a whole load of data without the context. I'd love to know what you think, so do hit me up in the comments if you have any questions. If you think I was too long and I waffled on a bit too much, then please do tell me. I'd love to hear from you. With that, I'm just going to say thank you for clicking on this video. It really does mean a lot to me that so many of you take the time to watch these videos and comment on them. And if I'm lucky, I will see you back here real soon for another video. Take care. Bye.